So, our next storyteller is Taryn Tipton. Taryn is here to share her story about how she quit one job to become a minister, then quit that job to save her marriage. Here's Taryn Tipton.
My husband and I were college sweethearts, and we got engaged at a tailgate when we were 21 after just 7 months of dating. I graduated from college one weekend, and then I had a bachelorette party, and then I got married, and then I went on a honeymoon, and then I moved out of state, and then I started my first real job in 6 weeks. I was reeling, and I was madly in love, but my life had completely changed, and I had no idea what I had gotten into. Nobody graduates from college in Texas and says to themselves, you know what, I'm going to go to Shreveport, Louisiana. But that's what happened for me as I followed my husband to medical school there. It's not what I would have picked. I went with a bad attitude, but I was committed to being a good and supportive wife. I was surprised to find that being a good wife was a lot harder than I anticipated, but Shreveport was surprisingly easy to love. The church and the community that I found there was absolutely paradigm shifting for me. It was completely different from the conservative, traditional Southern Baptist church that I had grown up in. I mean, these people were fun and they were authentic. And I finally understood what some people mean when they say, like, this is my church family. I found that my questions and my doubts were welcome instead of swept under the rug, and I began to see faith communities as having a critical role to play in making the world a more just and inclusive place. When those 4 years in Shreveport were up, we found out that we would be moving to San Antonio for my husband's residency, and everything was falling into place exactly as we had hoped. But late at night, these questions would rear up and refuse to be put to rest. Like, how long would it take for San Antonio to feel like home? And how would I ever find friends like this and a church like this? But the questions didn't matter because we had to move to San Antonio for his residency. So a year into that move to San Antonio, we had all of our boxes unpacked and both of us were settled into new jobs. The wounds of leaving our community in Shreveport were still raw. I missed what we had left behind. And then it happened. I was invited to become the first female minister at the church that I loved. And how could I say no to that? It was my dream job. So in February of 2018, I quit my normal, stable job in San Antonio, and I accepted the position as a minister. And in that role, I got to become the type of person that I always needed to see growing up. A woman with work that mattered, a woman in a leadership role, and something important to say about faith and hope and community. So for 3 months, I wore out the roads between Shreveport and San Antonio, going back and forth, trying to navigate this new role as a minister while still trying to be a present partner to my husband in San Antonio. But I found that I was living a double life. It was full of connection and purpose when I was in Shreveport, but when I was in San Antonio, I was just a wife in an increasingly unhappy marriage. So my apartment felt lonely, and the few moments that my husband and I had between his long shifts at the hospital were fraught with tension. I believed that I was building towards this rich life that we would share, but he didn't understand. He just thought I was being selfish and I was putting this job over our relationship. And finally, he reached a breaking point. He couldn't do that back and forth anymore, and he gave me an ultimatum. Leave the job at the church or our marriage will fall apart. And like the good wife I had always been, I quit the job. And that summer of 2018, my life was at a standstill. I was in a holding pattern, fighting for my marriage and waiting for my husband to decide if he would fight too. And eventually, he decided. He wanted a divorce, and I had to move out because how could I afford the apartment? I'd quit my job after all. And so suddenly I found myself jobless, churchless, spouseless, and homeless. So I holed up in my sister's guest room, and about a week and a half later, I emerged because after all of that, I needed a damn margarita. And so I went to happy hour, and there he was, my husband, sitting at the bar with some bleach blonde with too much eyeliner. And my hand started shaking, and I ran out of the bar without paying for my drink. And I remembered, wait, that shirt that he's wearing, his favorite red shirt, I literally just ironed that shirt that he's wearing on his date. It's like, oh, so mad. And I realized in that moment that I was fighting for this marriage that he had quit a long time ago. And it was time for me to quit too. And I also realized I needed to get the hell out of Texas. And that is how I ended up on a one-way flight to Madrid. I told my family, I don't know if I'll be gone for 3 weeks or 3 months. I don't have a plan. And I don't know what I'm doing, except all I know is if I'm just going to be sad and apply for jobs, I might as well do that somewhere I'm not going to bump into my husband while he's out on dates. But of course, almost immediately upon landing in Madrid, I panicked, and I woke up the first night at 3 a.m. crying right as all of the 19-year-olds who were sharing my room, they came back like drunk and laughing. And all I could think to myself is like, what am I doing in the top bunk of this cheap hostel surrounded by drunk European teenagers? Like, I just want to go home. But the home I missed didn't exist for me anymore. And the husband I missed didn't exist for me anymore. So after a couple of days, though, I felt like I can take a breath. And I was sunburned, and my feet hurt from like walking all over the city on cobblestone streets, but my mind was clear. I had so desperately needed something to shake me out of this grief and shame spiral that I had been living in and remind me that there was still life and beauty in the world. So one weekend, I took a bus to the coast, and without even stopping to check into my hostel, I went straight to the beach. And while I was there swimming in the Mediterranean, looking up at the sky, I thought to myself, my whole life, like I've done all the right things, I've checked the boxes and followed the rules, and my life is proof that you can do that, and it may all fall apart anyway. But I realized when it all falls apart, at least you get to decide how to put it back together. And I did put my life back together. Not only had I quit 2 good jobs, now I quit an understanding of marriage that was tainted by harmful ideas of submission. I quit my entire identity. I quit the life I thought I wanted. I'd built my identity around all of these expectations, and I was determined now to become a person of my own making. And as I remade myself, I found new, purposeful work at a grassroots nonprofit that empowers women who've been marginalized and abused. I finally found my people in San Antonio, and I found a supportive partner who loves me so well. I don't think that everything happens for a reason, but ultimately, none of those painful experiences were wasted because all of that quitting led me to the truest and freest version of myself. Thank you. I'm Taryn Tipton.
Yeah,